All right, everyone. Today I've decided that I'm going to make some bake in Auntie's honor. Actually, some friends invited us over to brunch for Easter, and I said I was going to bring some bread, some homemade bread. I was going to make some Creole bread, but I decided maybe I could do part of the dough as regular bread and part of the dough as bake. So we're going to try something. Now, of course, we don't have the outdoor. We don't have the outdoor fire, but then perhaps we might be able to use a stove top. I'm going to experiment a little bit, see if we could use a stove top, and then with that stove top, maybe a low heat, but with a sort of a cast iron pot that I have, and then sort of put the bake on the inside of the cast iron pot to see if it actually will work. So it's an experiment, all right? So I'm about to knead the dough. Of course, like the old days, we used to kind of do it by hand. But hey, so this is Aunty 2.0 or something like that. And I got my flour with the yeast already in it and the salt and the sugar. And then I have the extra flour that I'm going to add after I add the liquid. Got my liquid right here, which I decided instead of using a little bit of shortening, I decided to use actually coconut, the block of the coconut oil or coconut fat. So my bake is going to have a coconut kind of flavor to it, but without the coconut flakes, of course. And then I wanted to kind of make it a little light and fluffy, so I decided to add 2 eggs to it as well. So it looks a little yellow, as you could see, because it has eggs in it. And I'm using the coconut thing. Let me see if I could find it to show you what the box looked like. It's from Grace. Right here, Grace Jamaica Pure Creamed Coconut, all right? So you basically just add that to hot water and it will melt, and then we're ready to go. So I'm about to pour in my liquid into the flour and let that knead for a little bit, get it soft, and then add the additional flour before I decide to do a hand kneading as the final stage before we break it up into small portions and so on. Some of you might be old enough to remember that we used to have a tray in the old house, a wooden tray, and then we used to Auntie used to knead the flour in that wooden tray. Well, you got no wooden tray over here. Just use your countertop. And if you have the right kind of countertop, you certainly can sprinkle a little flour on that there. And capetwidoa. Nice and soft. What's that? You can never be hungry when you could feed yourself. So, guys, it's always good to learn how to cook, so nobody can starve you. So, this looks good. Look at that. Perfect. Cool? So now I have the dough in a bowl. I'm just going to cover it with a slight damp cloth and let it rise. And that's more for my bread, as I mentioned. And then I'm going to make the bake with the rest of the flour. And I'm going to do that one on the stove top while this is going to go in the oven when I got it all ready to go. Now I'm about to make my bake. Now for those of you that know me, if you'll know that I like to experiment a little bit. So since this is Aunty 2.0, and I'm experimenting, it might flop, I don't know. I'm going to do a couple things extra. One is I'm actually going to add Parmesan cheese to the mix. Yeah, believe it or not, Parmesan cheese. Give it that kind of little kick to it. So I'm going to add about a tablespoon of Parmesan cheese. And then I want a little kick in it. So I'm going to add some cayenne pepper, right? I'm going to sprinkle some cayenne pepper in there. And then a Trini friend of mine, I noticed one time she made Trini bake, and then she mixed some yeast and baking powder. So I'm just going to put, because I already have some yeast in there, I'm just going to experiment a little bit, and I'm going to just put a little bit of baking powder in the mix, and have the yeast and baking powder do their thing, whatever that is. Let's see how that goes shortly. Let me add the ingredients. Some cayenne pepper, and so we go. Yeah, give it a little kick to it. I love cayenne pepper, and they say it's good for cancer, fighting cancer. You know, everything good for fighting cancer. Zabuiko, you know, Zaboka, Shatine, Tutsa, Ibon pour cancer. So I'm just going to add those two things there. And in terms of the baking powder, like I said, I'm experimenting. So I'm not going to put too much because it already has some yeast. I put about a half a teaspoon, or maybe just 1 teaspoon of baking powder. I've heated up some more of that coconut cream I told you about, just a little bit, with some butter instead of using shortening, and or margarine actually. And so I heat up the water a little bit so that it melts, and then I'm going to add that in there, and let's mix that up, and then we will add the flour that's necessary to make it nice and dry. Okay, so I have decided I'm actually going to make 1 bake in the oven and 1 bake on the stove. So I'm rolling the dough, of course, nice and round, and then I put it on a pizza stone, which is interesting, as opposed to a pan. It conducts the heat very differently, and I suspect that will give it a different kind of you know, outcome. Okay, the bake is in the oven, as you can see, and I'm going to actually now experiment with this idea. I have a cast iron pot, very thick. So if I had a nice metal thing, that the same metal thing Auntie just put on the stove, that would be essentially what I'd be using. And I'm going to try to roast that in that pot. Let's see if it works. Here is your baker. As you can see, I have my apron and everything. All right. So I've just flattened out the dough for the other one, and I'm going to try to put it in that pot. I'm actually going to cover the pot and see what happens. You know, maybe that way it traps a bit of heat on top, and then I could then flip it once the bottom starts to get brown. Now folks, look at what I discovered. I have a grill on my stove. I've never used it. We've had this stove for 2 years, never used it. And you see my bake was starting to form already. And then of course I have this thing right here that I could make pancakes on, which is kind of cast iron as well. Well, not quite cast iron, but fairly solid. So I could put it on there like that, and I could take my bend and throw it on top of there. Look at that. Ooh. And it's already starting to get brown. So let's see if we could get things cooking up a storm right here and see how that works out. And then I could take it out of the Dutch pot or the cast iron pot, although I suspect this might actually be better. But I want to see it happening. So I'm going to put it on here like that. That way I could watch it. Okay? And then hopefully our bacon side there is getting cooked. Alright, now I'm actually going to go and make the bread. I want to make some penate, and we'll see how that comes out. So this is the dough for the bread. As you can see, it's rising a bit, right? But and I'm going to actually make just a couple of rolls and put it on this pizza stone. And as I mentioned, I think the pizza stone has a different feel in terms of how it spreads the heat. And so I'm going to knead my bread right now. think I'll take that bake to my friend's house. Yeah. I can see the little dots on it. You see the little tape? That's the Parmesan in there. And maybe some of the cayenne in there as well too. And voila! Here's the bread cooking. You see the pennati already starting to swell. The rolls below there. I didn't have time to let it rise. So it's a cross between how you cook a bake and bread. Folks, the stove now, you're wondering what's happening over there. Look at that. Huh? Look at that. Now, tell me that don't look like bake. So on the grill, so if you grill it, you get something different. And so I put it back in that Dutch pot because I feel that maybe the heat from the top was going to help it cook better. So I think that was a good idea. So now take a look at those two things side by side. One done on the grill, the other one done in the oven. This one, right? Looks really nice, but that one looks more Creole. So that is how I'm going to start making my bake from now on. Right in that Dutch pot. Man, that looks good. Yeah? You see that? Very Creole. So bloaters and the gang, if you want to make bake, if you have a grill, you see? So that is the fire. And then put your bake right inside of that pot. And when you cover it up, you get heat on the top, you get heat on the bottom. So as you could see, here's the finished product. I made the two pennates, as you right here. Some rolls. And that bake right here is the one that was done in the Dutch pot on the grill. So as you could see, that looks kind of very Creole, right? And this one was done in the oven, nice and smooth. But of course, it doesn't look like Auntie's bake. That one looked more like Auntie's bake. So, and then of course I made a little, as you could see, with TTP and everything. So that is Auntie's influence with the bake, Mamila's influence with the bread as well. And so both of them gave me their recipes. May they rest in peace. Cool. So if you're looking for a lesson on how to make bake and bread, send check or money order or credit card details to Harvi Millar.